What we're going to be doing is setting up a basically a layout. Okay, and this layout is probably going to be a little bit more rigorous than you've worked with in the past. Mostly because we have to now coordinate exactly what the size of everything is on that layout with what size we render. Does that make sense? Okay. So in Photoshop, let's start with something, and I'm going to keep it simple, something you know, an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. So let's go to File, New. We'll switch this to inches, and we'll switch it to width 11 by 8.5. Okay, so now you see this thing resolution. Probably a few of you are guilty of not paying much attention to this resolution when you actually create a new Photoshop file. Okay, it is the most critical component when you set up a file, and when you save files, and when you export files. It is the crux upon which everything is sized, and the resolution and quality of an image is created. So when you start setting up your layout, you need to know what resolution you're working in. Generally speaking, it's a good rule of thumb to start really high, because it's easy enough to go down in resolution. It's very difficult to go up. In fact, it's impossible to go up, because then your images are just going to turn into those blocks like we saw before. So we're going to start off at 300 pixels per inch. So to give you a sense of what that means in terms of capabilities, most standard printers are only 150 dpi. They'll print at a rather lower resolution than other printers. If you need something that's like a glossy print, then you want to go up to a higher, like 300 dpi image, because it's a little sharper. Okay. And especially for vector prints, if you're printing plans, you're going to need 300 or higher, because 150 is going to be too small for arcs and fine lines and stuff like that. All right. So what are we doing? We are actually going to create a layout, and every time you submit something in this class, you should have a layout created that has very clean margins. At first, I'm going to define what those margins are. And later on, you'll be, given the freedom to sort of design what those margins are. And I say design very intently, because some designs lend themselves to very narrow margins, other designs lend themselves to very wide margins. The choice will be yours. It is not yet. Right-click on the rulers. Please make sure that this is set to inches, so we can set it based off of what we know as a size. And let's start laying out some grid lines. Okay, so you guys all know how to create a grid line, right? Just click on the ruler and drag it out. All right, so hold shift if you need it to snap, and we're going to snap this one on the half-inch line, and then grab another one. We're going to snap it on the half-inch line here. We're going to grab one and put it half-inch. So, I don't need to explain everything I'm doing. Make a half-inch margin all the way around the page. So now we have essentially a 7.5 by 10 inch view to work with. But we're going to have 3 components on this page. We're going to have, let me draw a quick diagram up on the board. So you're going to have a rendering component, you're going to have a pixelated compositional component, and then you're going to have a color palette component, all on the same very small sheet. And they're all going to have half-inch margins around all of them. So we need a margin across the middle. So 8.5 makes this 4.25. You can just go 1/4 inch up. So 4 inches and then 4.5 1.5 inches. Okay, and then what you need to figure out is how wide, like what are the proportions of my image that I want to use. So we already know it's a 300 pixel per inch image, and if I'm going to have, you know, kind of a small side thing like that you see up on the board, I'm going to bring this out to something like 7 1/4. Something like that. So what we need to figure out is what are the sizes of these elements going to be. We're going to have one image here. We're going to have another image here. And we're going to have another color palette sort of composition thing going on here. I mean, this kind of gives it to you, which is quite nice. I don't know if you guys realize this. You could do the math, but you could also just select those objects and it'll tell you. Where's my picker tool? Yeah.
Can you get rid of the grid line? Because I missed the one on one.
The grid line. Oh, get rid of them?
Yeah.
Use your move tool and just drag it up back into the bar. It'll go away. It's the best way I know of, anyway. So one of the cool things I think about this program is obviously it's like super rasterized, so everything is measured in pixels. So if you use this little box method, it instantly tells you what the resolution is for the image that you need to create. So my rendering is actually kind of a vertical sort of layout size. So if I select that rectangle in my layers down here, and I have the properties panel open, it tells me that it is 1,875 pixels wide by 2,250 pixels tall. Is that clear? So when I go back to my rendering, I need to change my resolution to fit that. So let's start off with the output. What I like to do with this is I like to kind of like shrink it down to be really small and then change the pixel resolution and then make it larger, just because oh, it's not going small anymore. There we go. Because it's so high. 400. I keep doing that. I keep moving my mouse off of it. 400, and oh, you know what? I should probably clarify something for you on this. Let's go back up to 4,000. Let's go back up to 8,000. So take a look at what this does when I have lock film ratio on. If I have lock film ratio on and I scale it down, nothing changes. I could scale it down or up. This is 1,000 pixels either way, and it's still exactly the same size. In order for me to be able to, you know, interactively scale it up and down, I have to unlock the film ratio. So now I can click it and scale it down, or type in a new size, and it will actually reduce the size of the frame. Okay, so something like that. So I like to just, for me, I'm very kind of tactile. I like to think of the digital world as a physical world, so I like to shrink it, get the size I like, and then scale it back up to the size that I need that fits my screen. So we have, let me get this right again. It was 1875 by 2250. So we could do 187.5. Actually, it might even just fit. Maybe it won't actually. Let's see what it does. So 1875 by 20. Yeah, it will fit. 2250. Cool. So then after that point, you can just click and drag these. 2250. I keep doing that. 2250. And then lock the film ratio, and then, oh, you know what? That's right. Forgot about that. Sorry. So we are at 1875 and 2250. So going back up is a little funny because if you unlock the film ratio and you scroll 1, it only scrolls one dimension, right? 2250. If you get yourself in that situation, the easier way is to just take the, and this is what I did before, right? When you lock the film ratio, then you have to change the film size. So that's a clarification, I think, on the previous video, is that when you unlock the film ratio, you can dynamically or interactively change the output width and height by scrolling it up and down. You can also change the size up here by scrolling it up and down, but it's only going to do one at a time. But when you lock the film ratio, the actual pixel count won't change the size, but the frame will. Does that make sense? So this is kind of what I was getting at about it being really confusing, and it will hang you up at some point. You'll get confused. You'll forget some stuff, but don't worry, it happens to all of us. So 2250, I'll go back to the normal size, and I'm just going to size this thing pretty darn close to the outside of my frame. Okay, so you guys are free to, I think, change the proportions of the image that you're laying out based on what sort of proportions you have on the pixelization assignment you guys did. But I would say, try to stick to a rendering that if you're going to do like a horizontal layout, then I wouldn't go any more than like lighter than, say, 3 inches or so in the vertical dimension for your other image. Does that make sense? Like what I'm showing here. If you do a horizontal thing at the bottom and you decide to put your pixelization up here with your color palette over here, don't go really any farther below 3 inches, something like that. Okay. What questions do you have? Okay, so what I'd like us to do is get a draft render. I'd like you to run it for 15 minutes. Okay, and then we're going to incorporate that here, and then we'll move on to the other components after you've done that.